I mean, we've got a lot to get to, so let's bring in our first guest. She's been out on the campaign trail with the president consistently. They're all in when it comes to this election. I want to welcome back to the show the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you, Sean. I'm enjoying you guys discussing the details and
crazy,
and getting into it. Like, because I'm a geek too. I love this stuff. So.
All right, let's go, geeks.
Let's geek out.
This is it. And I think throughout the show, we're literally, after you come on, we're gonna go state by state and break this down. And that's what I want to ask you right off the bat. 270 is what's needed to win. The president got 306 last time. What do you guys look at a path or paths to 270 electoral votes this time? What are those key states on election night, as Emerald and I were just talking about, that we want to focus on?
Well, like you just said, you've got to hold Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, right? You've got to hold that in the states you won in 2016. Then you can win just a Pennsylvania and win. Then you can win just a Michigan and win. Then you can win a Wisconsin, Nebraska 2, and Maine 2 and win. And then you've got Minnesota out there, Nevada out there as well. So there are multiple paths. I do think you're right. Pennsylvania is going to take a long time to count. Some of these counties aren't even going to start looking at absentee ballots till the day after the election. So if it comes down to Pennsylvania, we're going to have a long wait.
So, Ronna, real quick, because I think that you and I probably on the same page on this, those East Coast states, Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina, where I think we have a greater likelihood of knowing something on election day. If the president were not to carry one of them, and we're going to break this down because I think he will carry all three, but if he doesn't carry one of those three, are there still paths to 270?
There are, because you've got Wisconsin out there and Michigan. So if you get those combinations in Nevada and Minnesota. So there are paths. But listen, what we're seeing in those states right now is we're winning early vote. On the ground, the momentum's shifting our way. They had a lot of absentee voters. We know this. Democrats in these special elections were putting a ton of absentee ballots in, and then our voters were coming on election day. We saw it with Chris Jacobs. We saw it with Tom Tiffany. I think that's holding true right now. A lot of their voters that voted absentee were election day voters, and we're starting to see our voters come out on the early vote, and then they're going to save it for election day because our voters are not as inclined to vote by mail right now.
So that is something that I do want to ask you about, though, Ronna, because this is really unprecedented early voting, right? As of Wednesday morning, there were more than 71 million total ballots cast. And in some states, it's harder to see. I know that the campaign touted Wisconsin, saying the Republican vote is really strong there in early voting. But what are you seeing? How do you feel about these states like
Florida,
Wisconsin?
we're doing very well in early vote. Georgia, Arizona, I just talked to my people on the ground in Arizona, North Carolina. So the early vote is really where our voters are coming out, and we're removing these deficits day after day after day that we had from the absentee voting. And by the way, they pulled their election day voting back to vote absentee, so they cannibalized some of that vote. And we have a whole bunch more of election day voting to go. So I feel good about where we're at, the momentum. It's going to be tight. It's going to be tight everywhere. And it's going to come down to who's turning out their vote on November 3rd. Speaking
of turning out to vote, strategically, the RNC and the Trump campaign have their people out on the ground knocking on doors. The Biden campaign went all virtual, and I've said this a long time, that if Trump pulls this out by just a hair, it's going to be because of that RNC Trump ground game being responsible for it. But are you concerned? I mean, I've seen headlines. Bloomberg had one just recently that says Trump campaign shifts Florida ad spending, and now the burden is falling to you and your team at the RNC. Is this a false narrative? Is this a red herring? Do you guys have the money?
Yeah, it is a false narrative. The campaign has the money. And let me just give you a couple numbers, Sean and Emerald. In October, heading in October, we had 251 million between the Trump campaign and the RNC. You know what Hillary Clinton had? She had 165 million. You know what Barack Obama had? He had 143. So we had more money than both of those campaigns, plus a ground game, plus out registering Democrats in 6 battleground states, plus 2.5 million volunteers on the ground. So we've invested our money along the way to turn out our vote. And what we're seeing from the Biden campaign is there is no ground game across the country.
By the way, I just can't imagine having that much money in the final 30 days being like, you take 10 million, you take 10 million. It's crazy.
Well, so, I mean, Sean, you know this as well as anybody. I'm sorry to say this, Emerald, because I know Sean's an RNC person, so
yeah,
I get this. But
I get it.
There's more tools to turn out your vote. It's TV, but it's also digital, and it's also mail, and it's also live dial, and it's
those
door
workers
knock.
need to get paid. That's the thing, is that people don't realize the human investment.
Exactly.
Right.
So you can't just say TV buys win an election. That's
Right.
not what it is. It's the whole combination. So how are we approaching these voters? And I think right now door knocks are more impactful than anything because those are neighbor to neighbor and they're relationship driven.
Yeah.
And that's how you change a vote, when you talk to a friend or a family member. And that's common sense. And the RNC has now passed the Obama ground game that he had in 2012. It's the largest ground operation in the history of politics.
So how impactful are the rallies? Because I know in 2016, I was looking at those polls, but I was seeing thousands of people come out to these rallies, and I was telling people, these polls can't be right. And it's the same thing we're seeing this year. Tons of people at the rallies, thousands.
Huge enthusiasm.
Yeah, lots of enthusiasm that we don't see on the Biden side. So is it the same phenomenon?
Well, first of all, we get our rally data. So many of the people who are attending these rallies, I'd say close to 20% at most of them, didn't vote in 2016. So that's one thing. So we're getting a lot of data from the attendees. If you're going to stay in line for 4 hours, which I did this week in Michigan in the freezing cold, and I sat at that rally, you're going to go vote, okay? And the second part is that's another part of your grassroots army. So when you stand up and I stand up before the president and say, I need you to go talk to 5 friends and your coworkers and your family, and you need to make sure they vote, and you need to hound them from today until Tuesday, and don't stop until they get out and vote. That's a difference maker when you're sending 10,000, 20,000 people out to also go be motivated to turn out that vote.
Yeah, I tweeted out, by the way, the president got 3 Supreme Court justices for us. Let's all get 3 votes for him. I think, this doesn't just happen. But before you go, I want to just ask you, yesterday, there's this big tech hearing. Jack Dorsey, the head of Twitter, is telling people that, they're not censoring the right. I don't know where anyone's coming up with these crazy ideas. The Hunter Biden story is getting suppressed by mainstream media organizations. How concerned are you about this censorship from big tech and the media?
I'm really concerned about it. We talk about Joe Biden as a pathway to socialism. I think that we're already a part of the way there. We've lost a free and fair media. I mean, to see that this anonymous author who really had no interaction with the president gets $1 million book deal, is on the front of the New York Times, and really had was not verified at all, to see that be pushed, and then to see this Biden story that is credible, that the Biden campaign's not even refuting, be suppressed and smothered by the media. It is really alarming to the American people. This is a part of socialism. This is part of the pathway, losing that free and fair press.
100%. And I hope people understand how important voting is, because you just said it exactly right. Ronna McDaniel, thank you for everything you're doing. I know you're not going to get a lot of sleep for the next 5 days, but you'll be able to rest in probably 35, 40 more days when this is all done.
Let's hope. Let's hope it's not that long, Sean.
I hope not. I hope not. But the Democrats got their lawyers ready. Anyway, thank you for your efforts. Appreciate you being back with us.